Hey, what's going on, gang? Nate on the Stone here. Welcome back to my channel. Hope that you're all doing well. Hope that you're staying safe, and more importantly, that you're staying healthy. Even though the world is still going to hell in a handbasket, this is still a very special time for a lot of people because it is Holy Week for Christians and Jews. So to all of my Jewish subscribers, if I have any of them, or if anyone who happens to stumble upon this video and is watching it happens to be Jewish, a very blessed Passover to all of you. And to all of my Christian brothers and sisters, a very happy and blessed Easter to you all. And I hope that the peace and the joy of the resurrected Lord is upon you and upon all of your families. I think that it is a great comfort to know, especially in times like this, when the world is falling apart and nobody knows exactly what's going on anymore, that it is that we have the understanding that there is more to reality than just what we can see and what we can feel, what we can touch, right? There is something beyond our five senses. And that is what one of the things that this Holy Week is all about, reminding us of that, reminding us that the spiritual, that the religious is not even just out there somewhere, but it is it surrounds us, right? It is here in the world with us, whether we like it or not. So again, yeah, hope that you all have, whether you are Jewish or Christian, hope that you have a very good Holy Week. And speaking of joy and rapture, that is partially what our first story for this week is about, because there has been another shakeup in the 2020 presidential election, because Bernie Sanders, as I'm sure many of you saw this past week, called off his bid to win the White House. He has chalked up another failure to become president. Failed in 2016 and he failed in 2020, which means that Joe Biden is now the presumed Democratic presidential nominee. Okay, and I say presumed because, of course, the convention hasn't happened yet. I believe that has been pushed off until August, but he is basically the last man standing. And so he is the presumptive nominee. That is actually really interesting. I was reading that Joe Biden is the first Democrat presidential candidate in the last 50 years to lose Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada. He lost those three, the very first three caucus or primaries, and yet he still won the nomination. It all started with South Carolina. He won South Carolina's primary in a landslide, and that gave his campaign the second wind that it needed, right? Sanders had been seen as the guy who was really leading the pack, and then after South Carolina, he was constantly playing second fiddle to Biden. And so, while it's not a historical moment, you guys know that I hate that phrase, especially as it's used today. It is actually very interesting and very fascinating and remarkable, even, I will say, that a candidate who lost all three of those early primaries and caucuses, the ones that you're not supposed to lose if you really want to have a shot at the nomination, you're not supposed to lose those, that yet he did, and yet he became the nominee, just shows again that anything is possible, and that the old conventional wisdom continues to take a shellacking. However, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about specifically Bernie Sanders, okay, and his dropping out of the race. There is a ton of stuff to talk about, and so I'm not going to shove it all into this video. I will be making a regular On the Stone video where I talk about a few more of my thoughts regarding Sanders dropping out and kind of what that means, my thoughts just about that whole scenario, but I'm going to get a few of them out right here for you guys today. And the first thing that I have to say is that I have noticed a very annoying trend on the right ever since Sanders announced that he was suspending his campaign on Tuesday, I believe it was, because the right was really slapping itself on the back for Sanders' defeat. I saw it, oh yeah, congratulate yourselves, Patriots, you did a great job. The Blaze and the Daily Wire giving mock send-offs of sadness, kind of pseudo-dirges to Sanders and his campaign, because the reaction on the right was that, all right, we defeated socialism again. Hallelujah. We did it, gang. We did it. America is still working in an operation. And I hate to rain on people's parade. I really, really do. However, I really don't see how the right can take any credit for Sanders' defeat. Okay? If Sanders had been the Democratic presidential nominee, and this was November, and he had gone up against Trump in the general election, and Trump had won by a landslide or not, it doesn't matter. But if that had been the scenario, and Sanders had still lost, then I think that people on the right could validly, pat themselves on the back, pop open the champagne, have a cold one on the house, because they had, you could make the argument, and I think that it would be a true and valid one, that they had, convinced the country not to vote for a socialist for president. They had convinced enough people to either stay home or to vote for Trump, or had even convinced them, that socialism is not a good system by any stretch of the imagination. If that had been the scenario, then it would have been justified, I believe. But here, it wasn't, because Sanders didn't lose a general election. He lost a primary. The people who decided his fate were registered Democrat voters. And I hate to break it to anyone, who is in the conservative commentary, right, who is part of that circle. Those Democrat voters, okay, are generally, I would wager, not the people who listen to you. They're just not. I'm not going to say that there are no patriots among registered Democrats. I think that there are still. They might be few and far between, but I still think that there are some. Okay? However, whether they are patriots or not, they are generally not going to be listening to people like Mark Levin, Glenn Beck, Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, Andrew Klavan, Allie Beth Stuckey. They're not going to be reading the Washington Examiner. They're not going to be reading the Federalist. They're not going to be reading Red State, or National Review. They're not going to. Or if they read it, they're just doing it like I read the New York Times or the Washington Post or Vox or Slate or Salon or any number of websites that I read. It's to see what the other side is saying, what the other side is arguing. They're not necessarily going to get their information and to be convinced of an argument, or just to, or they're not going there as part of the choir to be preached to. They're not going to. So again, I don't think in this situation that the right can really take a lot of credit for what happened here. But that's small potatoes, because the real meat and potatoes here is something bigger than that a lot of people, I think, have overlooked in all of the popping of the corks and everything, which is this. I honestly and truly think that this scenario, Biden becoming the presumptive nominee, could very well potentially be a classic example of be careful what you wish for, because you might actually get it. Okay? That is going to sound pessimistic as hell, and I don't mean it to be, but just hear me out. I think that there is a very real possibility that people on the right will end up wishing to God that Bernie Sanders had actually been the Democratic presidential nominee instead of Biden. And I say that for a couple of reasons. First off, Sanders at least is coherent. That might not mean much, especially, when he's kind of a, socialist light candidate, right? Has been for decades. has been very upfront that he is a socialist. Although he would say that it's democratic socialism, but that really doesn't matter, right? But at least he was coherent. At least you could follow along with what he said. You could disagree with his ideas, but at least you could follow his ideas along. Biden, as you all know, can't even really string a sentence together, right? It has genuinely been sad throughout this entire primary process to see Biden slowly, deteriorate more and more and more. It has been sad as hell. Honestly, it has been. But that's where we are. So the man who can't even string a sentence together, who can't even remember the preamble of the Declaration of Independence, he is the Democratic nominee for president, okay? Not the crazy guy, right? Not the crazy madman socialist over here whom you at least could follow along. You could argue sort of with him because he had ideas to argue against. Biden, you don't even really know what he's talking about. He doesn't even remember, for example, what state he's in or who was the president, right? The president that he served under as vice president, he doesn't even remember, can't remember at times who that was. All right? And that is profoundly dangerous. That is profoundly dangerous for a couple of reasons. It really raises a question, and it really offers an opinion. Okay, it raises a question, and it brings up an opinion that should both scare the bejeebers out of all of us, I think. The question is this: who is going to actually be operating the show now? Right? Again, Biden is the presumptive nominee. Who's going to be running the show now that he is a presidential nominee, Joseph Biden, and not just presidential candidate, Joe Biden? Who's going to be running the show? Because going off of what I just said about his mental deterioration, which has been evident for the entire country to see, someone has to be calling the shots. Biden himself cannot be making decisions. I don't think that he has the capacity to do that anymore, right? So who's calling the shots? Who's going to be the power behind the throne? This, I think, is especially pertinent because Biden has actually said that he is going to be doing something unprecedented, okay? Biden, like many, many politicians, he is taking full advantage of the coronavirus, right? He has said that by the time of the convention, he is already going to have his cabinet picked out, okay? This is unheard of for presidential politics. As far as I'm aware, right? You never started picking your cabinet. You never had your cabinet arrayed, okay, before the general election because there was no guarantee that you were going to win the election. That was for the intermediate period, right, between election day and inauguration day. And if you won the general election, that's when you would go around and, talk to your friends, talk to your allies and be like, hey, would you like to be the attorney general under my administration? Hey, you're my first choice to be Secretary of State. Hey, would you, like to run, this federal program? Hey, would you like to be the Secretary of Education? Hey, you know what? You want to be an inspector general. There's going to be an opening here. Oh, I think this guy would make a good judge here if there's an opening here, etc., etc., etc. Right? That's when you make those decisions, not before the election. Too many things can happen. There is even no guarantee that you're going to win the election, right? But Biden has said that because the coronavirus poses such a threat to us, that there is no time to actually wait around for any of that. By the time of the convention, he says he is going to have his cabinet picked, which means he is going to know exactly who is going to go into which position. He's going to ask, he's going to get everyone's okay, and then basically he's going to have a shadow executive branch running for president. It's not just going to be a candidate, a nominee. It's going to be a shadow executive branch with a presumed president, vice president, and an entire cabinet already there. And what's scary about that is what some of the people whose names have been floating around. I mean, vice president, we already know he said that he was going to pick a woman. So Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, Stacey Abrams, Amy Klobuchar, I forget her name right now, but the governor of Wisconsin, they have all been laid out. But other names have been floated by too, not for vice president, but for other positions. So for example, it has been suggested that our old friend, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, it might be tapped to become the Secretary of Labor in a Biden administration. Okay? Now that is both fascinating and terrifying at the same time. You see all the damage that she has done just as a freshman congresswoman. Imagine what she could do as a secretary in a cabinet position. Imagine what she could do there, right? And so then that leads to the question, again, the old question, who's going to be the power behind the throne? Who is going to be it, right? Is it going to be Cortez, assuming that she is part of the shadow cabinet? Is it going to be whoever his vice president, pick is, his vice presidential nominee is? Who's going to be actually running this campaign? Who is going to be saying, we're going to focus on this, we're doing this, this is the strategy we're going to do, this is how we're going to respond to this? Who is going to be doing it? Biden is going to be the face of it, absolutely. But who is going to be controlling him? Who's going to be pulling the strings? Because somebody is going to be, okay? Because the man cannot run a campaign on his own. That's the question. The opinion here, think about it like this. Yes, the Democrat Party rejected Bernie Sanders. They rejected the flat-out socialist. But who did they replace him with? They replaced him with a man who cannot articulate a thought anymore. Sad to say. A man who is going to have a power behind him calling the shots. And registered Democrat voters were okay with that, right? They didn't care. Because for them, defeating Trump is the primary goal, okay? Biden for them is a blank slate. I honestly don't think that Biden has... This is very, very dangerous because he does have support in the Democrat Party, but I think that it is more pragmatic support. I think that after he started winning primaries and caucuses after South Carolina, I think that people just started saying, well, my candidate isn't going to win, or my candidate has already dropped out. Like, I was supporting Pete Buttigieg, but he already dropped out before Super Tuesday. Oh, you know what? Over here, I was for Elizabeth Warren, but now she's dropped out, etc., etc. I think that there was a lot of I think that Biden has, honestly, a lot smaller and a much less enthusiastic base than someone like Bernie Sanders. So I think a lot of people who ended up voting for him, who gave him this nomination, are doing it pragmatically because they said, oh, look, he's won all of these. His support is rising. Therefore, because I want to defeat Trump, I will back Biden. I will back the man who is mentally deteriorating right in front of me. He's like the incredible melting man, except the melting is happening all up here on the inside instead of all out here on the outside, right? That should terrify everyone. Because instead of saying, whoa, hold it, we've got to do something else. We've got to do something different. We've got to get, what? Give us Andrew Cuomo, give us, I don't know, give us anybody. Give us the rent is too damn high guy. Anybody except Joe Biden, right? But they didn't because their desire to defeat Trump is so great that they ended up rallying around a man, right, who doesn't even know what state he is in, more often than not, and who is going to be having a power behind his throne, a power that no one is going to know about. We're never going to know exactly whether it's in his campaign or if he does happen to win in November in his administration, who is calling the shots. That, I think, should scare the bejeebers out of everybody because it shows just how far they are willing to go right now. Shows really how desperate they are and how it shows you what all they are willing to do to bring Trump down, right? Because this is not a rational decision. Not a rational decision at all. This is a pure political, ideological decision to back Joe Biden, okay? So there you have it. Call me Johnny Raincloud if you want, but because of those reasons, those questions and those reasons, I truly and honestly believe that the right is going to wish at the end of the day that Bernie Sanders had been the nominee instead of Biden. But then again, you know what? The election is still, let me think here, it is still 7 months out. A little less than 7 months out. So we will see what the future holds. That is story number 1.